Imagine being forced to ask permission from a rival power every time you wanted to sail into your own waters. For decades, that was the reality facing Poland. On the surface, it seemed almost unbelievable. Poland, a sovereign NATO member with hundreds of kilometers of Baltic coastline, still depended on Russian approval for certain maritime access routes. The reason lay in a narrow waterway known as the Baltic Strait, the only natural passage connecting the Baltic Sea to the Vistula Lagoon. The strait sits within territory controlled by Russia's heavily fortified Kaliningrad region. Any vessel seeking to enter the lagoon from the Baltic Sea had to pass through a route effectively controlled by Moscow. Commercial ships, fishing boats, government vessels, and even movements connected to national security were subject to a geopolitical reality that many Polish leaders considered unacceptable. Then Poland decided to change the map. After years of political debate, engineering challenges, environmental disputes, and financial controversy, Poland completed one of the most strategically significant infrastructure projects in modern Eastern Europe. In 2022, the Vistula Spit Canal officially opened, creating a direct connection between the Gulf of Gdansk and the Vistula Lagoon without passing through Russian-controlled waters. The project cost approximately $450 million. Supporters celebrated it as a historic victory for national sovereignty. Critics argued it was too expensive and economically questionable. Military planners saw something entirely different. To them, this was never just a canal. It was a strategic statement, and it sent a message directly toward Russia's military stronghold in Kaliningrad. To understand why this relatively small waterway matters so much, we first need to understand the geography. The Vistula Lagoon is a large body of water separated from the Baltic Sea by a narrow strip of land known as the Vistula Spit. The lagoon is shared between Poland and Russia. For centuries, access between the lagoon and the open sea depended on a natural channel near the city of Baltisk. The problem was simple. The channel belonged to Russia. As relations between Moscow and Warsaw deteriorated over the years, Polish officials became increasingly uncomfortable with this arrangement. They worried that Russia could restrict maritime traffic whenever political tensions rose. Those concerns were not theoretical. In the past, Russia occasionally limited access or imposed administrative obstacles that reminded Poland how vulnerable its position really was. Every restriction reinforced a fundamental strategic lesson. Dependence creates leverage, and leverage creates vulnerability. For a country with a long and often painful history of foreign domination, that vulnerability carried powerful symbolic meaning. Poland's relationship with Russia has been shaped by centuries of conflict, partitions, occupations, uprisings, invasions, and geopolitical rivalry. As a result, strategic independence holds enormous political value. The canal became more than an infrastructure project. It became a matter of national pride. Construction began in 2019. Massive excavation equipment moved into the sandy landscape of the Vistula Spit. Engineers cut a completely new passage through land that had separated the lagoon from the Baltic Sea for generations. The project included a navigation channel, breakwaters, bridges, locks, and supporting infrastructure designed to allow vessels to move directly between Polish waters and the open sea. When the canal officially opened in September 2022, Polish leaders celebrated the moment as a historic achievement. The message was straightforward. Poland no longer needed Russian permission to reach its own waters. That alone made the project significant. But the canal's strategic implications extend far beyond questions of sovereignty. To understand why, we need to look at Kaliningrad. Few places in Europe attract as much military attention as this small Russian exclave wedged between Poland and Lithuania. Separated from mainland Russia, Kaliningrad occupies a uniquely important position on the Baltic Sea. Over the years, Moscow has transformed the region into one of the most heavily militarized areas in Europe. Advanced air defense systems have been deployed there. Anti-ship missile batteries are stationed there. Electronic warfare units operate there. Naval forces are based there. Military analysts frequently describe Kaliningrad as a forward operating fortress designed to project Russian power throughout the Baltic region. In any future conflict between NATO and Russia, Kaliningrad would almost certainly play a central role. Its location allows Russia to threaten maritime traffic, monitor military movements, and potentially disrupt NATO operations across a wide area. This is where the Vistula Spit Canal enters the strategic picture. By creating an alternative access route into the lagoon, Poland reduced one of the advantages Russia previously enjoyed. Instead of relying on passage through the Baltic Strait, Polish vessels can now use a route fully controlled by Poland. That means Coast Guard ships can move without Russian approval. Government vessels can move without Russian approval. Military support craft can move without Russian approval. Even in a crisis, Poland retains direct access to the lagoon regardless of Russian decisions. This independence may seem minor at first glance, but military planning often revolves around eliminating vulnerabilities before they become emergencies. The most dangerous dependency is the one discovered during a crisis. Poland wanted to remove this dependency before that moment ever arrived. The timing of the canal's completion added even greater significance. Just months before its opening, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Across Europe, governments suddenly reassessed long-standing assumptions about security and strategic infrastructure. Projects once viewed primarily through economic lenses began to be evaluated through military and geopolitical lenses as well. The canal was one of them. Many observers who had questioned its value now saw it differently. What appeared expensive during peacetime looked much more reasonable in a world where military conflict had returned to Europe on a large scale. Poland's security concerns no longer seemed hypothetical. They seemed immediate. The canal also fits into a broader pattern of Polish defense policy. Over the past decade, Poland has emerged as one of NATO's most active military spenders. The country has invested heavily in modern tanks, artillery systems, missile defenses, fighter aircraft, and infrastructure projects designed to strengthen national resilience. Warsaw has repeatedly argued that deterrence requires preparation. The canal reflects that philosophy. It is not merely a transportation project. It is strategic infrastructure intended to increase flexibility during uncertain times. NATO planners have also taken notice. The Baltic region represents one of the alliance's most sensitive areas. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia occupy exposed positions along NATO's northeastern frontier. Any future crisis involving Russia would likely involve questions of logistics, reinforcement, and maritime access. While the Vistula Spit Canal alone would not determine the outcome of such a conflict, it contributes to a broader network of infrastructure that enhances operational flexibility. Additional routes create additional options. Additional options strengthen resilience, and resilience strengthens deterrence. Yet despite all these advantages, the canal has one unavoidable weakness: geography. No matter how useful the project may be, it remains located extremely close to Kaliningrad. The same geography that made the canal strategically important also makes it strategically vulnerable. In any major conflict, infrastructure near a heavily militarized region inevitably attracts attention. Military analysts frequently point out that fixed infrastructure can become a target. Ports can be targeted. Bridges can be targeted. Rail lines can be targeted. Canals can be targeted. The Vistula Spit Canal is no exception. Its location places it within range of numerous military capabilities deployed in Kaliningrad. Russia possesses missiles capable of striking targets throughout the region. It maintains extensive surveillance assets. It operates sophisticated electronic warfare systems. It fields naval forces capable of operating in nearby waters. As a result, the canal exists within a contested strategic environment. This reality highlights an important distinction. The canal reduces dependence on Russia. It does not eliminate Russian influence from the region. Kaliningrad remains a powerful military factor. Even supporters of the project acknowledge this fact. The canal improves freedom of movement. It does not create immunity from regional security threats. Still, supporters argue that this criticism misses the broader point. Strategic infrastructure is not expected to solve every problem. Its purpose is to reduce vulnerabilities and increase options. By that standard, the canal succeeded. Before the project, Poland faced a clear dependency. After the project, that dependency largely disappeared. The security environment remains challenging, but Poland now approaches it from a stronger position. There is also an important psychological dimension. Infrastructure can shape perceptions just as much as capabilities. When a country invests hundreds of millions of dollars to remove a strategic dependency, it signals determination. It demonstrates willingness to pay a price for autonomy. And it communicates long-term intentions to both allies and rivals. The canal sends precisely that message. It tells allies that Poland is committed to strengthening regional security. It tells adversaries that Poland intends to reduce vulnerabilities wherever possible. Such signals matter in international politics. Nations constantly assess one another's intentions. Large infrastructure projects become visible expressions of strategic priorities. The canal is one such expression. Of course, debates continue regarding its economic impact. Some critics argue that shipping volumes may never justify the enormous construction costs. Others question whether commercial traffic will grow enough to produce substantial financial returns. These criticisms are not entirely unfounded. Infrastructure projects often struggle to meet initial economic forecasts. But supporters respond by arguing that the canal was never primarily an economic project. It was a strategic project. Evaluating it solely through commercial metrics misses its broader purpose. National security investments are rarely judged only by immediate profit. Military bases do not generate profits. Air defense systems do not generate profits. Strategic redundancy does not generate profits. Yet governments invest in these assets because they provide security value. Supporters place the canal in the same category. They see it as an insurance policy. And like all insurance policies, its value becomes most apparent when something goes wrong. The events of recent years have reinforced this perspective. Europe has witnessed war on a scale many believed impossible in the 21st century. Energy dependencies have become geopolitical weapons. Supply chains have become strategic concerns. Critical infrastructure has become a matter of national security. Against this backdrop, the logic behind the canal appears increasingly understandable. It reflects a broader lesson spreading across Europe. Dependence carries risks. Diversification creates resilience. The canal embodies that principle in physical form. Yet perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the story is how a relatively modest engineering project became intertwined with great power competition. On a map, the canal appears small. Its dimensions are dwarfed by massive shipping routes elsewhere in the world. It is not the Suez Canal. It is not the Panama Canal. It does not dominate global trade. But strategic importance is not always measured by size. Sometimes a narrow passage connecting a lagoon to the sea can carry implications far beyond its physical dimensions. The Vistula Spit Canal is a perfect example. It sits at the intersection of geography, history, military strategy, and national identity. It represents Poland's determination to control its own access routes. It reflects NATO's growing focus on resilience along its eastern flank. And it highlights the continuing strategic significance of the Baltic region in an era of renewed geopolitical competition. The canal has not made Kaliningrad irrelevant. It has not made Russia powerless. It has not transformed the military balance overnight. Those claims would be exaggerations. What it has done is more subtle and perhaps more important. It has removed a long-standing vulnerability. It has expanded Poland's strategic options. And it has ensured that access to Polish waters no longer depends on decisions made in Moscow. In a world where geography often shapes destiny, that is no small achievement. The story of the Vistula Spit Canal is ultimately about sovereignty. It is about a nation deciding that reliance on a rival power was no longer acceptable. It is about investing hundreds of millions of dollars to change a strategic reality that had existed for generations. And it is about understanding that security is often built not only through armies and weapons, but through infrastructure, planning, and the determination to reduce vulnerabilities before they become crises. For Poland, the canal represents independence. For NATO, it represents resilience. For Russia, it represents the loss of a small but meaningful source of leverage. And for the rest of the world, it serves as a reminder that sometimes the most important geopolitical battles are not fought with tanks or missiles. Sometimes they are fought with maps, engineering projects, and the determination to redraw the strategic landscape itself.